This is a conversation we started last week. That it's fairly well confirmed and established that Cape Town is the ninth most congested city in the world, the most congested city in the country. And we discussed this issue and asked listeners what time they leave home in the morning to avoid peak rush hour. Some listeners mentioning they're hitting the road as early as 5 a.m., particularly from areas like Mitchell's Plain, Brackenfell, Strandfontein. At present, there are several road and public transport upgrades that are underway across the city. It includes roadworks leading out of Mitchell's Plain and preparations for the MyCity Southern Line that connects parts of Mitchell's Plain and Kiewit to the southern suburbs, Kenilworth, Claremont. The project is currently underway and it's the largest infrastructure development in the Western Cape. It's a classic case of short-term inconvenience for what would be a long-term benefit. Of course, people will say, but why can't we build more roads? Roads is an unsustainable solution. The research shows that the wider the roads, the more cars you attract. And that's why during last week's show, some listeners raised important questions. What are employers doing to ease traffic, and how is the city working with businesses, with employers to coordinate commuter movement during peak hours? Andrew Mason is the CEO of Workplace Fundi and was part of a city-led symposium last week on greater efficiency and productivity in the workplace. Good morning, Andrew. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate you getting up. But earlier this morning, what time do you get on the road to get to where you need to be for your morning commute, Andrew?
Oh, Lester, you've actually caught me literally just about to take my son to school. But I don't have necessarily quite the same problems. I live in Pretoria, so I came down to Cape Town last week. I do understand the traffic problems in Cape Town. In fact, I got an Uber from the airport at about 2 o'clock, I think it was, on Wednesday afternoon, and I noticed again that bend round Grooteskia. It's getting busier and busier, earlier and earlier. But yes. So I don't quite have the same problems, but I'm an early bird anyway.
What roles, if any, would an employer have, responsibility have, when it comes to at least accommodating staff who struggle with transport in the morning? One could argue that we had an opportunity of remote working, flexible working during a lockdown period, but many people have returned to work. Do employers have the responsibility to help with the city when it comes to easing congestion?
Absolutely, they do. If they want to get a better solution, absolutely they do. Unfortunately, I think we sit with I'm sad to say, an immature management style that sees that bums on seats is productivity. Presence in the office is productivity. And I think we all know the one thing we have learned from COVID is that that's not the case. I'm a facilities manager, a workplace manager. So in many ways, people would say, well, you want people back in the office because it means more work for you. That's not the case. I want people to work in the workplace of their choice. Now, the workplace of their choice, it's 5 years ago this weekend that we went into lockdown. And within a matter of months, most individuals who had the ability and were probably privileged enough to be able to put themselves behind a door in their own house and didn't have caring responsibilities were able to build a better workplace at home than we have done as the building industry and the facilities management industry have in the last 150 years. So allow people to make their own solutions. And I think to go back maybe to your question and say the first thing that management needs to do is to ask their people what they want. And I think they're scared to do that because they haven't yet quite worked out in many industries, and some have, what productivity means to that business. And are these people really working at an output level that the company can sustain? And I think this sort of hoarding people inside four walls is going back to an industrial era type of workplace, and that is not the solution.
Would staggered work times work at all? One tranche starts at 7, another at 8, another at 9, maybe others at 10 and 11. It means that you spread the load of when people are making their way into maybe a CBD area. This would, of course, maybe take a little bit of coordination with other employers in that particular area or the city, Andrew.
It might work, and it would work for some people. And I think the issue here is for every company to find out what works for them. And I think we live in an era of technology which is hyper personalized. We know that on our social media scrolls. We know that this targeting advertising, this hyper personalization. People want that in the workplace. Now, you obviously cannot build a workplace of 2,000 or 3,000 people with every single individual fully catered for. But what you can do is ask people what they want. If they want staggered work times, that's fine. What you're seeing now is when people are returning to work, if they have, or returning to the office, I should say, not returning to work because they're working at home, returning to our office, they're actually coming in for social reasons. They're coming in to collaborate with their colleagues, to have a coffee with their colleagues because they are sick of working too much at home. So staggered work times potentially goes against that. So having the right people in the office, your colleagues in the office, is often a magnet to draw them in. But for me, it's actually building and designing a workplace and managing a workplace that people want to come to. That's the issue for me. And I think that is when magnets work better than mandates in many ways. So mandating people to come to work to a pre-COVID designed office is not going to work. You're going to have resistance.
Would adopting maybe not a 24-hour workplace culture, but let's say a 12, 18-hour workplace culture where we get out of the dimensions of work and operating in business hours in South Africa are 8 to 4, 9 to 5. But we say, well, our business operates. Yes, we have a team that starts at 6 and they'll go to 2. And then we'll have a team that is 9 to 5. And you know what? Maybe we'll even have a team that starts at 10 and our business operates till 7. Wouldn't that also have a knock-on impact of saying, well, if you have companies operating for extended hours, it means you have the coffee shop downstairs operating for long hours. It means the convenience store just around the corner where people buy their lunch or their dinner also operates for longer. Does this then have a knock-on effect of eventually building a almost 24-hour economy, which I think that we actually need to look at if we want to talk about long-term economic growth in this country, Andrew?
Absolutely. I think we are blessed to be living just off the Greenwich Mean Time line. So we are international. There are plenty of international businesses in Cape Town that are servicing the Far East, the Middle East, and even America. So certainly from an international global village type perspective, there are people that have work days that start at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe even 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think again, this hyper personalization thing. It's not only working where you want to, but it's working when you want to. Can a company design a workplace policy around that? Yes, of course they can. But again, we have to balance this idea of what does the individual want. And I think management really owe their staff a conversation that says, guys, where do we want to work? What is it about our work that makes us unique? What is it you want? And certainly, when I do surveys of companies, one of the first things on the agenda is public transport and commuting to work. Why must I sit in traffic for an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to a place of work, to sit down and do emails when I can do that perfectly well at home? I'm prepared to make that. I mean, there's this idea that presence has a purpose. So I'm quite happy to go into the office if we have to meet my colleagues and there is value in me meeting my colleagues. But I'm not going in there to sit in a room and do emails when I could do that off my sofa if necessary, quite happily with the technology that we have.
A message here that says too many morning meetings where its only purpose is for the boss to see that you're actually at the office. These meetings could be emails. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, I agree with that. I mean, I'm of a certain age when I was working in the 80s, and I had a client who used to have meetings on Friday afternoons, would you believe, before he flew off in the evening, and the only reason was to fill his time to fill his time whilst he was waiting for the plane. So yes, I mean, bosses will do that. I would suggest that if you're working for that type of boss, then you should probably try and find somewhere else to work for.
Andrew Mason, founder of Workplace Fundi, really appreciate your time. Has your workplace made it convenient for you to say, let us stagger the time that we arrive at the office? Let's do away with the morning meeting. Let's do an afternoon check-in, because we do have an issue with traffic, transport, particularly into a CBD here in Cape Town. Have you taken an innovative approach?